All right, everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be really diving deep on this expert analysis of the Fed's January 2025 FOMC meeting. So basically, what we're trying to figure out is, where the Fed stands on interest rates right now, how they're feeling about inflation and inflates. Get this.
Okay. What
potential conflicts might be brewing between the Fed and the White House? This is juicy stuff, so
yeah.
Buckle up.
Well, it's interesting because the Fed decided to keep interest rates unchanged this time around,
right?
Which most people were expecting.
Right, yeah, no big surprises there.
No, but the analysis really digs into why.
Okay, so why?
Why?
Was there any talk of doing something different? Were there any members pushing for a rate cut?
Not really. I mean, it seems like without any major shocks to employment or big negative changes in fiscal, government spending and taxes and all that, a rate cut right now would have been a pretty big shock.
That makes sense. But one thing that I thought was really interesting in this analysis is how much emphasis they put on inflation.
Oh, yeah.
They're saying the Fed is actually more focused on inflation data than employment numbers when they're trying to decide what to do with interest rates.
Well, that's because it all comes down to what the Fed is supposed to do, right? Their main goals are to keep inflation under control,
right,
and to try to get as many people employed as possible. But right now, the analysis says that they are laser focused on seeing a steady downward trend in core inflation, which is inflation without all the volatility of food and energy prices. And they want to see that before they even consider cutting rates.
So they're really prioritizing keeping prices stable.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay.
Now, the analysis does say that rate cuts are probably coming later in 2025. Yeah. But there's always a but.
There's always a but.
Right. And in this case, it seems like the big but is the White House.
Yeah, the White House is throwing a bit of a wrench into things.
Okay, so tell me what's going on. What's the White House doing that's got everyone so nervous?
Well, think about it. Remember that executive order that paused all the federal grants? And then there were all those threats about more tariffs?
Oh, yeah.
Those kinds of sudden policy changes, they make waves. And markets really don't like unpredictability.
So basically what you're saying is that the White House being unpredictable is making it really hard for the Fed to do its job.
Exactly. The Fed needs data. They need projections to make informed decisions. And when you have the White House making these unexpected moves that could have who knows what impact on the economy, it gets really tough to plan ahead.
So what's the Fed doing about all this uncertainty? Are they freaking out?
Well, the analysis says they're mostly taking a wait-and-see approach.
Yeah.
They want to see if all this uncertainty actually turns into real economic problems before they change their outlook.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's something I thought was really interesting. The analysis says that the Fed is more worried about inflation that comes from things like labor shortages or even, those tariffs we were talking about than they are about the possibility of the White House trying to restrain spending.
Yeah.
Like, cutting spending or raising taxes. Why aren't they more worried about that?
Well, that's a really important point that the analysis makes. Right now, it looks like the Fed is more concerned about inflation coming from limitations on the supply side of the economy rather than inflation that's triggered by the government spending too much money. They seem to think that those supply side pressures are the bigger threat to prices staying stable.
Okay, so it sounds like they're walking a tightrope here.
Yeah.
Try and balance all these different economic forces. And that brings us to the big question. Could all of this lead to an open conflict between the Fed and the White House?
The analysis definitely brings up that possibility. There could be disagreements on all sorts of things: interest rates, executive orders, financial regulations. And even though the Treasury Department might be advising the White House to be more careful, there's no guarantee that the president's going to listen.
Which puts the Fed in a really tough spot, right?
Yeah.
Because they can't win a public fight with the White House.
Yeah.
But they also have to stay independent and make the decisions they think are best for the economy, even if those decisions are unpopular.
Exactly. It's a really delicate balancing act with some potentially big consequences.
So to wrap things up, it sounds like rate cuts are probably coming, but when they'll happen and how big they'll be is still a big mystery because the White House is being so unpredictable.
Yeah. And that's a really important takeaway here. The Fed is dealing with a really complex and potentially volatile situation.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. It definitely leaves us with a lot to think about.
Can the Fed really stay independent with all this potential pressure from the White House? And if they can't, what's that going to mean for the economy? It's something we all need to consider. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those critical thinking caps on. Thanks for joining us.